The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Donald Trump's campaign basically stands for almost nothing in terms of policy. And one of the few elements of his campaign that we could even remotely call a campaign proposal is his completely asinine and half-baked immigration plan. And all of these terms like proposal and policy and plan, I'm using these in the loosest sense of the dictionary definitions of the words. He has this idea of rounding up 11 million undocumented immigrants, paying for what it'll cost to round them up, paying to deport them all, building a wall with Mexico that he says Mexico will pay for. Mexico will not pay for the wall. We would have to pay for the wall if that were to happen. And then letting people back in if they meet certain requirements, of course, other than the rapists and criminals, which from Trump's hyperbole on this seems to be most of the people that are trying to come in from Mexico and point south. It seems that Donald Trump is now even flip-flopping on that issue, which is insane to me, because when you go to Trump rallies and you ask people, what policy of Trump's do you like? Most people have no answer at all. The few people that do say, well, I like that he's going to get the illegals out and he's going to build a wall. And even on that issue, Trump seems to now be softening and saying, possibly, he won't even be doing the deportations. Let's start first with a clip from CNN on Sunday when one of his there's been a revolving door of campaign managers. His new campaign co-manager, Kellyanne Conway, was asked, he's still deporting people, right? And she said, that is now undecided. Take a listen.
Let me play something from what Mr. Trump has said previously. Listen to what he said back in November.
We're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely and
Are they going to be ripped out of their homes?
Can I tell you, they're going back where they came. If they came from a certain country, they're going to be brought back to that country. That's the way it's supposed to be.
So does Donald Trump still support that? A deportation force removing the 11 million or so undocumented immigrants?
What he supports, and if you go back to his convention speech a month ago, Dana, what he supports is to make sure that we enforce the law, that we are respectful of those Americans who are looking for well-paying jobs, and that we are fair and humane for those who live among us in this country. And as the weeks unfold, he will lay out the specifics of that plan that he would implement as president of the United States.
Will that plan include a deportation force, the kind that you just heard in that soundbite and that he talked about during the Republican primaries?
To be determined.
Okay.
Wait. Everything now is negotiable. It's to be determined. The guy who says that they're all getting kicked out by force is suddenly potentially changing that plan because, by the way, most people realize that the plan is completely impossible and unaffordable. So then, of course, after Kellyanne Conway opens the door to this, the questions go to Donald Trump. Are you flip-flopping on one of what I guess is the three major campaign ideas, ban Muslims, which he's already completely changed his position on, deport immigrants and build a wall? Trump himself insisted yesterday, I'm not flip-flopping. He went on Fox News last night. He said, the first thing we're going to do if and when I win is we're going to get rid of all the bad ones, then adding that everybody else will go through the existing process we have, which the Obama administration is using, and saying that that's what we're going to do. We're just going to enforce that with a lot more energy. Does anybody realize that of the few things the Trump campaign stood for at some point, this was one of the major ones? And even on this, Lewis, Trump is saying, actually, we may just do what Obama's already been doing, just with higher levels of energy. What does this guy actually stand for that would be different?
Trump knows he can say whatever he wants, but he knows, and his staffers and managers know, that he can't do whatever he wants. But still, apart from this, it's still shocking to me that a year ago, maybe even more, he was saying, well, I'm going to outline my plan soon.
Right.
And he's still saying that. Now he's the nominee, and he's still saying, well, at some point in the not too distant future, I'm actually going to give you details about my plans.
Oh, sure. It's coming up anytime. As soon as he figures out the best way to couch it to not lose the nativist xenophobic vote that he has coalesced and catalyzed. Another example of this, Jason, is last week or the week before, Trump came up with the brilliant idea of coordinating attacks with Russia and other countries against ISIS, which happens to be exactly what President Obama has been doing on so many issues. He bashes Trump and Trump bashes Obama and he bashes Hillary, and then basically goes back to, I'll probably do what they're doing just better and with more energy.
So the next flip-flop, the major flip-flop, he's going to, if he gets elected, which isn't going to happen, he's actually going to change the Democratic Party. That's his next flip-flop.
Yeah, he's going to change the Democratic Party from the inside as a Republican. You're convinced he won't win. I mean, you're saying it much more. I'm saying 22 of 23 recent polls say he's losing, but you're actually saying he's not going to be president.
And what's the one poll? Fox News, I'm going to guess?
It was like LA Times USC or something like that. That's the one poll right now that says Trump is ahead by 1, which really isn't being ahead. I mean, it's the margin of error. Yeah. So anyway, yet another one of the mainstays of Trump's supposed campaign platform, which, by the way, is a joke, falls apart. Interesting. We'll see how the nativist xenophobes react to that. I have to tell you about how Donald Trump and his kids and his businesses are being enriched by Trump's own campaign. So far, Republican nominee Donald Trump has paid nearly $8 million of the campaign contributions that presumably some hardworking people donated to him, to his own companies and to the companies of his kids, according to filings with the Federal Elections Commission. The campaign now sort of been transitioning to the general election, and these payments are starting to ramp up. In May, over $1 million, or nearly 20% of campaign spending that month, was redirected either to Trump's businesses or to Trump's kids' businesses. And Paul S. Ryan, not to be confused with Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, who directs he's the deputy executive director of the Campaign Legal Center, said that some of the actions that Trump is taking are legal, but that it's so unprecedented that a candidate has so many businesses that are being subcontracted by the campaign, sort of a patchwork of legality or lack thereof that has not been figured out. One of the things Trump has done, and this is just fascinating, it's legal for a candidate to rent space from themselves. In other words, if you own a building and you want your campaign run out of that building, the campaign can pay the owner of the building, which could be you, the candidate, rent. But what Trump has done in Trump Tower is more than tripled the cost of rent there now that he is using, rather than his own money. Remember, Trump used to be self-funding the campaign. Now that it's actually donors that are funding Trump's campaign, all of a sudden, rent at Trump Tower for Trump's campaign offices has jumped from $48,000 a month to just under $170,000 a month. Can you imagine if you're one of these middle class or lower middle class Americans who says, I want Trump because he's going to win. Believe me, he's going to be terrific for us, and he's going to bring back jobs that don't exist, that he outsourced to Mexico and China in the first place. You fall for that nonsense. So you say, I'm going to give my hard-earned $50 to Donald Trump, and then he's artificially increasing the price that the campaign pays his company for rent in his own building. I would be furious if I was one of those people donating to Trump. If they even hear about this, which they probably won't, they'll rationalize it in some way.
Yeah, because Trump is a hero and Trump can do no wrong, and that's how they see him. We theorized that this was the whole reason he got into this in the first place.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he thought he could win. It was because it would be good for him in terms of his popularity and his image and his brand.
Trump's campaign buys their bottled water from Trump Ice, Trump's bottled water company. Trump's campaign spent a bunch of money at a vineyard that happens to be run by his son, Eric Trump. The money is going to all sorts of Trump kids. You have manufacturers of Trump's Make America Great Again hats going to a board member in Eric Trump's charity. I mean, it's all completely incestuous. The other day, Trump's daughter, Ivanka, wore a dress from her fashion line, tweeted about where people could buy it after she wore it at the Republican National Convention, and then all of a sudden Nordstrom's and Macy's were sold out. This is the business, Jason, of running for president. And if we can criticize Trump for many things, he knows how to turn running for president into a business, doesn't he?
Pretty much. I mean, So my new theory is going to be that this wall, the reason he's building this wall is to raise the price of his actual suits so he can actually sell those for more money too.
Yeah, everything is self-serving, isn't it, Lewis?
It really is, yeah. And if he were really the hero that working class Americans think he is, his campaign money would be going into their businesses,
right,
and into these small businesses, and it's really disgusting.
What happens before the election is a sign of what would happen after. The campaign has been total chaos since the beginning. Why would that change if Trump becomes president? And the entire campaign has been a self-serving, self-enriching project. Why would that change after the campaign ends? Hey, Donald Trump is now going hard against the host of MSNBC's morning show, once again accusing the co-hosts, Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, of being, quote, neurotic and a mess, saying both of them are total clowns, and he's now threatening to tell the, quote, real story about them. Here's a couple of tweets that Trump sent out yesterday. The first one is, tried watching low-rated Morning Joe this morning. Unwatchable. Morning Mika, meaning Mika Brzezinski, is off the wall, a neurotic and not very bright mess. He then followed up that tweet with another one with a threat. Someday, when things calm down, I'll tell the real story of Joe Scarborough and his very insecure longtime girlfriend, Mika Brzezinski, two clowns. Why, all of a sudden, did Donald Trump start tweeting threats about media hosts, which, by the way, should uniquely disqualify anyone temperamentally from being president of the United States? Apparently, he didn't like this. Take a look.
He's had a great week. I think he's been on message. He's shown maturity as a candidate. I think that he's getting into a groove. I think he likes the new style that he's been out on the campaign trail producing and speaking of. So I think he's done great.
Everything's awesome.
Everything's awesome.
This is the part I don't understand, because I think this is you just have to look at this as an opportunity.
Mika's completely right, sarcastically saying, oh, sure, Rince, everything is just great with the campaign. Obviously, the campaign is not doing great. They're losing 22 of the last 23 recent polls. And if that, think, Lewis, what it says about a presidential candidate. If a host merely saying, yeah, you know, things aren't really that great, right? If that makes it so you take time from campaigning to tweet threats to media people, you are uniquely unqualified to be president of the United States.
And the threat was totally empty. It's one of those things where Donald Trump, and he's done this multiple times, will say, I know what's really going on here, or I have this information that I know that nobody else knows, and I'm going to tell people at some point. He's got nothing. And
I expect to hear what he knows right when we're going to finally get the real story of Obama's birth certificate, which has been years in the making now.
And when we hear details of his economic plan or ISIS plan or trade plan or a plan for the wall.
All I know is it can't get any worse.
Yeah. This is hardly the most inflammatory thing Joe and Mika have said about Donald Trump, too.
Well, there's been this sort of off and on relationship between Trump and the Morning Joe people, because remember when the leaked audio caught Trump talking with Mika and Joe during a break, and it looked like they were all very buddy-buddy. Remember this?
What do you have after this?
I make a speech, get on a plane, make a speech. I'm working.
Well, I tell you what, the Bloomberg poll, all the polls out today look great in South Carolina. All of them.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm being hit. You know, they're spending $75 million on negative ads on me over the last 2 weeks.
Right.
Are they catching on at all?
No.
What do you think? Are they catching on?
No.
They're vicious. They're spending a tremendous amount on negative ads on me.
No. You know what I thought was the kind of wow moment was the guy you brought up on stage.
Yeah, that was good.
We played it several times this morning.
We played it up against Obama.
Both guys. Both guys.
What it is, we played Obama first.
The young guy
and then we
was the champ.
played the guys.
I saw it. I watched your show this morning. You have me almost as a legendary figure. I like.
No, I tell you, this morning, what we basically said today was we were completely wrong about the
Totally.
debate. Yeah.
I thought
I did really well on the debate show, I have to tell you.
I didn't. Yes, Alex?
3 viewer questions.
You did not, right?
Oh, my God.
But then, after being very buddy-buddy, Joe Scarborough just a couple of weeks ago actually said that Trump didn't seem to understand why he couldn't just nuke countries. So things going in a different direction with their relationship. Take a look.
Several months ago, a foreign policy expert on the international level went to advise Donald Trump, and 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them? That's one of the reasons why he just doesn't have foreign policy experts around.
Trump asked 3 times.
3 times in an hour briefing, why can't we use nuclear weapons? With that.
Be careful, America, and be careful, Republican leaders.
So General Hayden,
your party is blowing up.
I want to ask.
So I get that there is some tension here, but I go back to the main question. If a presidential candidate is threatening media people on social media, that is not someone that should be president of the United States. Period. No further discussion is required. If I'm wrong, let me know on Twitter @dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Peter Carrillo. Peter, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. Membership is the #1 funding source for the show. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. If you ever shop on Amazon, going to davidpakman.com/Amazon will make it so that your shopping sends us a little kickback. And of course, we will be taking your calls live tomorrow, Wednesday, what is tomorrow? The 24th. Wednesday, August 24th at 1:15 p.m. Eastern. The number will be 617-830-4750. I look forward to hearing from you. All right, Lewis, let's get to my most popular Instagram posts of the last week. Of course, I'm on Instagram at david.pakman. This is the only platform where you can see things like bizarre pictures of me from weddings, which I will get to in a second. First of all, some of my cooking pictures have done stunningly well. And I put up a picture last night of an extraordinary chicken dish that I made, which I will show you here. What is your assessment here, Lewis, of this dish, which I've never actually done this before? I first sauteed the chicken in a very old, heavy cast iron skillet, then put the entire thing in the oven, and it came out extraordinarily well.
Yes, well, that's a great technique, and it looks delicious, I have to be honest. This is, I can get behind this one.
This is me winning again, because I used to never win with my Instagram pictures, and I'm finally winning again.
Listen, David has done tremendously well in the kitchen.
I've done tremendously well with the cast iron skillets. Okay, so people seem to like that. And then also, I was at a wedding in Cape Cod over the weekend.
Get your kids out of the room, quick.
A picture of me was taken with a few people, and it was one of these things where the sun was right in my eyes, and I thought, listen, it's one picture. I can stand with my eyes open and smile, and I won't be hugely negatively affected by the sunlight. And unfortunately, I couldn't deal with it. And what ended up is me with an expression on my face that is a combination of me crying and and having what really is a very bizarre and creepy look on my face, right?
Interestingly, the lens of the camera exploded a millisecond after this photo was taken.
So people very shocked and appalled that this was my physical appearance during a wedding where children were actually attending. But yeah, I just couldn't take it. I mean, it was just so bright that this is what it led to. It is one of the most bizarre pictures of my face that has been released on the internet, probably in the last 10 years, I would say.
Yes, I'd say that this one is far more disturbing than the picture of you pregnant as a toddler.
Yeah, right. There was a picture where I appeared to be pregnant at age 2, which was posted. Okay, so that's that. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram. I am david.pakman on Instagram, and that is that. Don't miss this picture. Okay, I've told you about the revolting, repulsive, sickening, stomach-churning, foul, and nasty hypocrisy, Lewis, of Republican politicians voting against federal aid for natural disasters outside of their district and then asking for federal aid when something happens inside of their district. And one example from a year or so ago was Oklahoma Republicans who voted against federal aid for Hurricane Sandy victims in New York and New Jersey, and then asked for aid for tornado victims in their home state of Oklahoma. There are many examples. and I have one related to the flooding in Louisiana, which is that 3 Republicans in Louisiana who voted against supplemental aid for Hurricane Sandy now are demanding that the government give them flood relief money. I am talking about none other than Steve Scalise, Bill Cassidy, and John Fleming. Fiscal responsibility and a tight checkbook and small government, very, very important until it's your own district that's in trouble, and then the government needs to do the right thing to help people in their time of need, blah, blah, blah. Which, by the way, I agree with. I just agree with it when it's not just your own district that needs help. And they asked President Obama for a disaster declaration in a letter a few days ago. Of course, President Obama signed it. He declared it a disaster area. Fleming, Scalise, and Cassidy, by the way, are also climate change deniers, which, we could do an hour just on these 3 individuals. I actually don't support keeping aid away from the people of Louisiana, right? They deserve the aid. The problem is that the politicians should be punished for their utter hypocrisy. And I get it. You need to represent your district, but you also need to be morally consistent. Now, they've been asked for comment on this. They do have an explanation as to why they don't think they are being hypocritical here. And the explanation is, and this came from Steve Scalise's spokesperson, the money that they asked for under the disaster declaration was already appropriated by FEMA. The money's already there. It's just a matter of declaring Louisiana flooding a disaster area so that they can get the money. The Hurricane Sandy money was supplemental money above and beyond what had already been allocated. This is one of the stupidest explanations I've ever heard, because in both cases, you're talking about money that is at some point appropriated by a legislative decision. Yes, the FEMA money was previously appropriated. Hurricane Sandy required additional money. It's all money that our elected officials vote on. This explanation is so boneheaded that it's almost embarrassing that they're even saying this.
And they shouldn't have to, because the extent of the damage that caused by Hurricane Sandy, of course, was greater than what the allocated money would cover.
Of course.
And so it is hypocrisy. And also, I don't know these guys personally.
No,
of course,
I'm sure that they're the best people. Absolutely.
But I do know people like them. And I bet you that there's a chance that they are only asking for this money so that they can get reelected. And do they really care about their constituents?
I would like to think that they do, and that
I don't think they do.
You genuinely think they don't care at all about the individuals that vote for them as people.
I mean, how many stories have we covered over the years that made it very clear that politicians like this don't actually care about their constituents and just want to be in these positions and have their eyes set on higher office as well?
Are you as cynical, Jason, about all elected officials as is Lewis?
Yeah, that's why I'm still, I've been debating this. I'm still in the no vote camp. I'm staying home, I think, still in November. That's
dear God.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll have a conversation about that a little bit later. Please, by the way, start sending in the messages about why what Jason is saying is outrageous and he should vote in November, and I'll start compiling them. And we'll have plenty of time to deal with that, right? I mean, there's pressing matters now going on, including what's happening in Louisiana. I want to talk to you, our listeners and viewers, about something Hillary Clinton did. And I want you to tell me whether I should be angry about it. Hillary Clinton used a private jet for what is basically a 20 to 40 mile trip, okay, depending on the route taken by the airplane. Over the weekend, she was on the island of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, with President Obama. And she flew to the smaller island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, which, depending on exactly what route you take, is about a 20 to 40 mile flight, okay?
Drive.
Well, no, it's a flight. I mean, you can't drive. I mean, there's 2 islands.
Right.
You'd have to take a ferry, but it's a 20 to 40 mile flight. Lots of the usual right-wing media are making a big deal out of how privileged Hillary Clinton is. And honestly, I don't really care about that. I mean, Donald Trump owns a 757 or 737. He owns it. Hillary is just flying on one. So this is not, for me, a story about privilege at all. Jet airplane takeoffs consume absurd amounts of fuel, right? If you compare fuel consumption during takeoff versus fuel consumption during cruise flight, the takeoff is insanely wasteful in terms of fuel consumption. If you're flying 20 to 40 miles, it's all takeoff. And you might hear this and say, David, well, listen, to get Hillary Clinton on a ferry over to Nantucket and then ferry back, security concerns, and she'd have to drive to the ferry. Well, I don't know that that's a good argument, because she'd still have to drive to and from each airport. You would still have to coordinate transportation. Yeah, she'd have to ferry it back to Martha's Vineyard before getting back on the private jet to go to the next place. But when you're trying to make the argument that you care about the climate, when you're trying to make it seem as though you really are connected to the people, a 20 to 40 mile private jet flight from one island to another, it strikes me as a very bad political decision. It's not a critique of privilege. Both Trump and Hillary are very rich. Trump, if you believe him, more so than Hillary. This makes no sense in terms of just the climate impact, does it?
No. But we know that Hillary, the climate and the environment, that's not a priority of Hillary Clinton. We know that. But this is just what you do. This is what you do when you're on a campaign. This is what you do when you're Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And this isn't surprising to me, but it is bad optics, and they should have considered that. Of course, I don't like it, but it's just business as usual.
If you are going to write to me and tell me that this is not something that I should be critical of, explain exactly why. And the explanation that Hillary is not as bad as Trump because he owns the jet and Hillary Clinton rents the jet, and Hillary Clinton is a Democrat and Trump is a Republican. For me, Jason, that's not a good explanation. If I see an action that I believe makes no sense, like a 20-mile private jet flight in the midst of what is a huge climate disaster, I get it. The 20-mile flight, it's not going to be the be-all, end-all. It's not going to solve the climate crisis. It's not going to also make it drastically worse. But this is just a very bad decision, isn't it?
And I think, kind of like Lewis's point, she missed a huge opportunity here. Her on, the ferry going from one island to the other with the people could have been great optics. But I can see, she is for the people in that, they would have bumped an entire, ferry, maybe get a private ferry. But I know from, I live in the Cape and I've gone to the islands many times.
Yeah.
Trying to get on that ferry, there's usually like many hour long lines. So,
okay, that's not bad. Jason is finding a silver lining here, which is these ferries are annoying enough to begin with. If Hillary Clinton is on a ferry, you'd better believe that if there's going to be lay people allowed on it, Secret Service is going to be heavily involved in inconveniencing all of those people. Or they might make it so that there's a ferry trip just for Hillary Clinton, which would disrupt all ferry traffic. So I'm shocked that somehow we found a silver lining to justify this. Jason has done it. That is something.
It's true, yeah. Well, when you're campaigning and you're doing as many stops as she is and you're all over the place, you pick the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and I guess that's 20-mile private jet flights. Send me your thoughts on this. Am I missing something? And this is something I should be okay with? I don't get it, but I'm willing to hear emails from you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today by Sam Sachs, writer, reporter, and co-founder of the Watchdog News website, The District Sentinel. Sam, last week we talked about this DEA decision, much anticipated in many ways, where they ultimately opined that marijuana should be kept as a Schedule I drug, along with heroin, other opiates, etc. We talked about the long list of reasons why this does not seem to be a good idea if you are a progressive who supports both consistency with regard to drug policy, progressive values, and sort of recognize the failings of the war on drugs. Give me your sort of top line concern with this. Is it along the medical research side? Is it along the war on drugs criminal justice side? Where should we be most concerned about this decision?
Well, both sides of that is concerning. I'd say what's also most concerning is the fact that the Drug Enforcement Agency and the Department of Health and Human Services seems to be not existing in the same reality that the rest of us are. The DEA's decision on this matter to keep marijuana as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD and other drugs that you would think are potentially far more damaging than marijuana is based off a recent study by the Health and Human Services, which the DEA petitioned them to do to do another study on marijuana and its possible medicinal value. And basically, HHS comes out and says that marijuana still has a high risk of abuse. It has no known medicinal value, and that even testing marijuana, even in controlled environments, could prove to be dangerous. Therefore, we need to keep this as a Schedule I drug. Now, that just doesn't jive with what is happening all around the country right now, where there's over 1 million patients, 1 million people in this country who are on medicinal marijuana. There are 25 states that have legalized marijuana for medicinal use. Another 4 states in the District of Columbia have legalized it for recreational use. So there are tons of people who are using marijuana right now as a medicine to treat a whole number of issues, from cancer to pain to epilepsy. You hear these stories all the time, and it's shocking that the DEA and the Department of Health and Human Services, for some reason, isn't understanding this.
There's this insane vicious circle that exists where most of those politicians that are against loosening the restrictions around this type of research and around legalization and decriminalization, as well as the DEA and the FDA, et cetera, they all say we're totally open to having our minds changed about cannabis, about marijuana. We just want scientifically valid and well-controlled clinical trials done under the investigational new drug application paradigm. The problem is that that's a paradigm that makes it very difficult to really do a lot of research, which in turn will make it so that we never actually get the loosening of restrictions. It's a circle that is completely closed, and to me makes absolutely no sense for anybody who says, I'm completely open to having my mind changed on this. Here's the mechanism through which my mind will be changed, and it's an incredibly restrictive mechanism.
Right. I think only the University of Mississippi right now has permission from the U.S. government to do this sort of research on marijuana. And this whole approach that you just broke down, it makes it seem like this isn't settled science. Like there's still a doubt whether or not marijuana can be an effective drug to treat a number of ailments in this country, when it is settled science in 25 states and for more than 1 million people are using it. And just there was research done on Medicare Part D recipients, and they found that because a number of Medicare Part, this is a prescription drug program, a number of people on the program are switching from traditional painkillers and using medicinal marijuana, which has in turn saved the government something like $230 million recently. So the effects of this, not just the people who are using it, prove that this has medicinal value, but it's also saving the government money in the long run as more people use marijuana to treat their ailments rather than the pharmaceutical companies' offerings. And if you look at who's behind it, I think this was an investigation done by Lee Fong over at The Intercept a year or two ago. A lot of the forces that are lobbying against marijuana legalization at the state level, it comes on a lot of ballot initiatives, are pharmaceutical companies. So they have an interest at stake here, and that's what could be one reason why you don't see the federal government and policymakers moving as quickly as the rest of the country seems to be moving on this issue.
And that sort of connects to another area where there's a huge double standard, which is that I can't think of a sort of logically consistent case for cigarettes and alcohol to be legal and regulated and taxed, but not marijuana, period. I mean, I feel like I can say much more about that, but I don't know that I need to. I have not heard a compelling case for why cigarettes and alcohol should be handled the way they are, and for marijuana to be a Schedule I controlled substance.
I haven't heard one either, other than a more cynical argument of the influence of these industries, but of the tobacco and alcohol industries. But even just look at what you hear on the campaign trail, or were hearing. I suppose you're not hearing much about it anymore. But the opioid abuse epidemic that's hitting the country. This is a serious problem all around the country. You heard politicians talking about it, and not a single person has ever died from using marijuana, and yet we're hooking people on all these painkillers that are proving to be very deadly for people, ruining people's lives, when there are medical alternatives to a lot of these drugs in marijuana, if if the government and policymakers would get on board with this. I mean, as I mentioned, half the country already, or half the states in this country already are on board with it, and over 1 million people already are on board with it as well. But there are serious problems with a lot of drugs that we allow that aren't considered Schedule I drugs, but are far more destructive than marijuana.
Not to mention, a lot of those Schedule II painkillers are one of the actual leading gateways when prescribed by doctors that will get people hooked on the Schedule I drug of heroin, because it ends up being much cheaper to buy heroin on the street than to try to convince your doctor to keep giving you Schedule II drug prescriptions or buying those pills on the street. That actually is a gateway mechanism that's established, and that also seems to be sort of missing from the context of the marijuana discussion. And here in Massachusetts, that's incredibly visible, as I know you know. Speaking of Massachusetts, there is going to be a vote here, a ballot question in November again on marijuana. Do you believe that those ballot initiatives and what we've seen happen in some states are actually going to turn the tide federally on the status of marijuana? I mean, so far, there's been some pretty significant resistance at the federal level, despite what happens in some states.
I think it leaves the federal government with not much of a choice on the matter. You're right, there has been a reluctance on the part of the federal government to reclassify marijuana, or to just drop the laws from the books, the prohibition laws from the books. But they have reacted to a lot of these states that have chosen to legalize marijuana recreationally by telling their agents basically to stand down. We have, of course, seen some growers and some establishments busted up, but for the most part, people are allowed to operate in a lot of these states as long as they're operating in accordance with the law, free from a lot of federal government intervention. And I think President Obama's Justice Department is respecting that somewhat, mainly because, is that really the fight that the Justice Department wants to take on right now, given all the other issues about prisons and, we imprison the most people anywhere in the world. I don't think we need to go around busting more potheads, and I don't think President Obama's Justice Department is interested in that. Having said that, I could easily see a different Justice Department, even a Donald Trump Justice Department, who's a guy who's going around touting himself as the law and order candidate, deciding that they don't care what all these states are doing. I mean, the federal government still is well within its power, since marijuana is still against federal law, to crack down on all this stuff. But I think the smarter approach, which the Obama Justice Department has sort of taken, is stand down and let these states do what they want.
Last thing I want to touch on, Sam, there are some who are opposed to both decriminalization and legalization of recreational marijuana, who say once you opened that door, there's no way to justify keeping any drug either criminalized or at least sort of like a civil violation for its recreational use. I tend to resist the slippery slope arguments unless there's a really strong, compelling case to be made for it. Is there one for that argument, or does that not really make sense?
I don't think it makes much sense either. I mean, just the fact that we have alcohol and cigarettes legal, and we've managed to resist all the rest of the drugs from being legal. Also, I'm somewhat sympathetic to the argument that perhaps all drugs should be legal. I know a number of countries around the world have experimented with this and have seen positive results, but that's going maybe pushing it a little farther than we need to be pushing it right now. This idea of marijuana being a gateway drug, I find it somewhat laughable, as though it's a unique type of gateway drug. I mean, I went to college. I hung out with the kids who were doing marijuana, and I hung out with the kids who were doing harder drugs, and you can tell there wasn't usually a link between those two types of kids. If you want to see what a gateway drug is, look at alcohol and the effects that has on an individual, and how that pushes an individual to do other drugs. And it's just a matter, I guess, of the DEA and the Department of Health and Human Services waking up to this. There was that infamous clip a few years ago when Jared Polis was questioning the DEA administrator, Michelle Leonhard, in which she refused to say whether or not heroin is a more destructive or more harmful drug than marijuana.
Yeah.
Well, she's now left, and we now have Chuck Rosenberg, who is slightly better. He admitted that heroin is worse than marijuana, but yet he called medicinal marijuana a joke. So only slightly better. There still needs to be a lot of growing up among among the leadership over there.
Yeah, incremental improvements, I guess. Sam Sachs, writer, reporter, co-founder of the District Sentinel. Sam, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Self-described white supremacist Daniel Rowe was just so angry when he saw a black man and a white woman kissing in Olympia, Washington, that he stabbed the interracial couple. The 32-year-old Rowe walked up to the couple and without warning yelled a racial slur and lunged with his knife, according to police. The blade grazed the woman and went into the man's hip, according to a statement from the Olympia police. After the attack, and this is the most amazing part, Rowe ran off as stunned onlookers dialed 911, and the 47-year-old male who had been stabbed, not realizing how badly he was injured, actually chased down the white supremacist, tripped him up, and held him on the ground, or rather, he hit his head on the ground and was knocked unconscious until police showed up. It's, number one, aside from the hate crime nature and just horrific nature of thinking that there's something wrong with people of different races being in a relationship, it's incredible that after being stabbed, you actually chase down the stabber, trip him, and then the guy's knocked unconscious and just it lays there until police show up.
Yeah, that's great. And this is another one of those stories. White supremacists, they pretend they're tough, but they're really not.
Is that what you think?
Yeah. And a lot of, I mean, the vast majority of them hide behind screens and post comments on YouTube, like the ones you see right down here. Yeah, I find that tends to be the case.
Police said that when they showed up, Rowe was unconscious, that he had tattoos that said skinhead, white power, and hooligan, and one tattoo showed a Confederate flag. He was arrested, booked into Thurston County Jail on 2 charges of first-degree assault and possible malicious harassment. And I like how police say, this has all of the hallmarks of a hate crime. What gave it away? The racial slur precipitated by a stabbing by a guy with all sorts of white supremacist tattoos on his body? How do you get to a place in your life, Jason, where you see a couple kissing and think their skin is a different color, so I should stab them?
I think it's many, many false layers of logic piled on top of a very simple animalistic brain. To me, that's all it could be, really.
But parenting has to be somewhat responsible, right? I mean, the reason I say that is, if at no point in your childhood do you start getting these ideas from parents, it would be harder to just be completely invaded with these ideas in the so-called outside world. Although it can happen. I guess there's a lot of weird YouTube videos around people can be radicalized by, but there's nothing natural about this type of racism. It has to be learned from somewhere, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I come from a very racist South Boston Irish kind of background, and maybe sometimes the apple falls from the tree, another apple, but sometimes it's an orange, and sometimes you go the opposite of what you've been taught because you actually know it's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably something to that. We do know some people, and we've interviewed former, actually, like for example, Scott Shepard, former KKK guy, who actually had sort of an awakening because he was completely surrounded by that type of thing. Absolutely crazy. It makes absolutely no sense to me that anyone would see 2 people kissing and say, I need to get involved, even though the situation affects me in absolutely no way. Although they would probably say, no, they are being affected by it because this is such a perversion of how the races should be divided in society or something like that.
That's, their logic. Maybe they think they're protecting white people or who knows?
I'm guessing that the white woman is a race traitor of some kind.
Yeah. If you were to ask this guy, I'm sure that she deserved to be stabbed as well.
Many, many people very, very triggered by the news that producer Louis Motamedi will be moving on from the David Pakman Show and seeking warmer and less urban refuge than what exists here in Boston, Massachusetts. I've compiled some of the more interesting comments that have been made in response. Here is just a few. How do you feel about your boyfriend leaving, David? You will be alone in your mom's garage. Another comment. Also, and it's weird to hear that Louis is leaving and then write in and say, hey, Also, David, are you gay? I'm just curious. You kind of give that vibe. Love the videos. Okay, that's very strange. Great comic from Dan Burke. We'll get to that a little bit later. Yeah, we posted a comic about Lewis leaving from Dan Burke. I don't dislike Lewis, but really all he ever said was yeah and agree with David. Another comment, I agree with Lewis. Boston sucks. Another comment, poor David is going to have to find himself another sycophant. Is it sycophant or sycophant?
Sycophant.
Is it?
That's what I call it.
All right, well, I stand corrected. I think Lewis contributed to the show significantly and enjoyed his perspective. Maybe I was a little biased because I think he's very good looking. That can bias people.
Ring-a-ding-ding.
Be the Lewis you want to be in the world. Great advice to Lewis. Poor David. Oh, that one's on there twice. That's weird. I must have made a mistake there. Okay, and we have a few more comments to show you. Oh, thank God. I may actually be able to watch the whole show now. Lewis has a face made for radio. Another comment, I like Lewis as a person, and I hope he is much happier wherever he winds up. Another comment, unsubscribing. Lewis was the best part of the show. Somebody wrote in saying, geez, if I didn't know better, I would think I was listening to a much older person, possibly one who is retiring, a bit unusual for someone his age. Yeah, the reasons you're citing are the types of reasons you would hear from a 67-year-old who's retiring.
Well, I don't feel that old, but I don't know what to say. I guess when it's 20 degrees out, maybe I do.
If you made him a proper, respectable part of the show, I'm not sure he would have left. Also, sorry to see David go, but hope you find your Nirvana. Yeah, I'm not leaving. A few people, Lewis, seeing the announcement that you're leaving, thinking I'm leaving. Another comment, David, keep the look you have in this particular video. The haircut and scruff is really working. I've never seen you look so handsome. Blue is definitely your color. This person clearly not affected at all by the announcement that Lewis leaving when that was their reaction. Second to last comment, we'll all miss you, David. Again, I am not leaving. Lewis is the one who's leaving. And to cap it, from the Eggman, Lewis is leaving because of a love triangle between Dave, cute intern, and him. Okay, I don't know who the cute intern is. Is that John?
He's talking about Rachel, no doubt.
Okay, who is not an intern. All right. And then lastly, I do want to put this up for you. We got a great new comic from Dan Burke, who does David Pakman Show comics. The drawings are absolutely fantastic, and we're putting it up for people who are watching with us. And it's basically a recreation of this is Dan's interpretation of how the conversation about Lewis leaving went. And I encourage you to check this out directly. I won't read it all to you since that's a little weird, but the gist of it is that Dan thought I was oddly jubilant about Lewis leaving, and also sort of ridiculed the questions I asked to Lewis about his leaving, and also sort of exaggerated the comical nature of Lewis's reasons for leaving. I love these comics from Dan Burke. They're really, really good.
Very funny, yes.
We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2DavidP, and we will also have a voicemail today about Lewis. Let's take a listen.
Hi, David. I was just one of your hugest fans who I've been watching you know, your handsome face all these years. But right now, I don't like you anymore, and my focus is only on your handsome coworker, Lewis, who never got any attention all these years. Sexy, handsome Lewis. Sexy, handsome Lewis.
Yeah, this is someone who would regularly leave voicemails about my physical appearance, and it's true. This individual completely neglected you for years, and now finally you are getting the credit that they believe you deserve. And for that, I guess we can all be proud and happy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, that's all I can say. I'm flattered.
On the bonus show today, we will talk about Olympic hormone suppression. We will talk about a Texas appeals court halting an execution. Usually, anytime courts get involved in Texas with executions, they're expediting them, not delaying them in any way. And we will also talk about how destroying history can now be considered a war crime. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership is the one way that you can sign up for membership and get instant access to the bonus show. And I will remind you that there is a coupon code currently still available for people who want a discounted membership. That coupon code is HATRIOT40, all one word, HATRIOT40. Use the coupon code when you sign up. Get discounted instant access to the world-famous bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.